Добрий день, я вітаю.
Hello, everyone who has joined us. This is Olga Tamanova. This is Ukraine Media Center at Ukrinform, the 9th year of the war and 132nd day since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. I'm grateful to everyone who shares the truth about the fight of the Ukrainian nation. We will have the following events today. At 1 o'clock, we are going to speak to Maria Mezintseva, the head of the parliament delegation at the Council of Europe, and we will be discussing the Lugano meeting. Later, we will have an interview with Sergei Bratchuk, discussing the consequences of the missile attacks on Odessa. And at 2:30, we will have the Speaker of the Ministry of Defense, Alexander Matuzanik. Right now, I would like to introduce to you our speakers, the initiative that was working to establish an important database of Russian propaganda. So here we have with us Oksana Moroz, the author and the founder of the initiative Don't Become a Vegetable. Also Oksana Loza from the same initiative, and Maksym Zinchenko, the data analyst. So I would like to give the floor to Oksana, and let us discuss how you managed to create this thing, because well, we all want the propaganda agents to be held accountable for their deeds. Thank you. So I will briefly introduce why we have established this database and what are the main goals behind it. We all understand that the Russian propaganda are not the main speakers that we see on the screen. It's a much broader network, and of course, one of the strong features behind Russian propaganda is the variety of tools that they are able to use simultaneously. These are not only media, these are also public speakers, opinion leaders, thanks to whom the war is brought to every home. So we tasked this database to, on the one hand, collect all of those who needs to be held accountable for the informational basis of this genocide of the Ukrainian nation, and to actually hold them accountable. So we intend to discover who is involved in this, and then to impose sanctions through the existing mechanisms, and to publish these names to make them known to the public. So we have right now specified 15 categories in the database. I'm not sure if you can see them right now because the font is a bit small, but all the categories are present to an extent in the information space, and they produce this information to change public opinion. So we are focusing on those who establish and shape the informational field. We have not focused on the so-called ideologists of the Russian world, but we will focus on them later on the next update of the database. And also we have included some exotic categories such as astrologers, esoteric specialist magicians, etc., because they are also supporting the Russian propaganda. We were focusing here mainly on Russia, but you will also find there are names of Belarusians and also some Ukrainians collaborating with the Russian propaganda. Our aim here is to show the different branches of this system, and as many names as possible supporting each of those branches for them to be held accountable later. Now I will request my colleague Anna to explain how we are finding names for this database. So can you briefly explain us about the categories included here? So, as Oksana has mentioned initially, it's not only a technical tool for holding people accountable, it's also showing us how the Russian public opinion is soaked with propaganda and manipulations and fakes that they are disseminated. Basically, a new reality is being created with lots of informational noise. On the one hand, a person may tell that they don't know where the truth is, thus they are not doing anything. And also they are able to pick for themselves any explanation of this war or special operation, the explanation that would be backed by their values. So how did we track this propaganda? Well, the primary level of the propaganda are the statements of politicians and public officials like Lavrov, Medvedev, Moskalkova, and also army officials such as Konashenkov and Mizintsev. They are creating the main vector that goes to the lower levels next, such as federal TV channels, the Ministry of Defense TV channels with that, and also the personal level of those who is consuming and broadcasting propaganda at the same time. Here I mean the bloggers, experts, talking heads, singers, actors, etc. So they are transforming their messages to shape them in such a way that they are suitable to their target audience. This makes the messages both universal and diversified. So let's look at the example. There is the broad message of Russophobia, and there are athletes and actors who have taken this message and supported it quite actively because their careers were impacted by the sanctions, and they perceive the situation as an attempt to cancel the Russian culture and themselves. So this became a very popular message, and it also was supported by the church, which shaped it for its own audience, that we are Russia, a holy country which has never attacked anyone and is just protecting its right to follow its own civilizational path. And also there are experts and traditional media, the ones who are speaking about the threat of NATO at the talk shows. So Lavrov has mentioned this about the political level of Russophobia. Again, we are protecting ourselves because people are trying to close us down. They are trying to cancel us. So there are 15 categories, as Oksana has mentioned. This includes experts, media, army, politics, theater and cinema, singers, bloggers, church, and also youth propaganda as a separate group. So we are speaking here about those who work with the young people, with the students, the youth army, etc. And there is also a smaller category which includes everyone else, because again, this is a primary stage of this database. It's being updated, and right now it's 1800. We want to arrive at 3000. So we have collected evidence, the screenshots of the streams, the social media posts, the regular media posts, also the participation in different propaganda events like the one in Luzhniki, participation in the so-called celebration of the 9th of May, which were also used to justify the special operation. Also signing the collective statements to support the special operation, such as the letter signed by many Russian writers, and also the blogs, and also other kinds of public support of the Russian propaganda aimed at different target audience. And we also were tracking the dynamics of it. Like, for instance, the person was silent in the beginning, but later joined such events. Again, this person was recorded as an agent of propaganda. And also, if we see that the person was attending occupied territory, this is an additional evidence. The markers included were not only the attitude to the full-scale invasion, but also participation in the justification of the war of 2014, and also denying the right of Ukraine's very existence, and all kinds of Russian narratives intended to destabilize the situation and banning the Ukraine as a nation. Thank you. Now let's give the floor to Maksym. I want to add an important phrase here. So what's going to happen with the database next? We provided it to the National Agency for Corruption Prevention. They also had the database of propaganda agents, which had 800 persons before the beginning of our collaboration. And we have established this collaboration on a regular basis, and they will be using our data to introduce international sanctions. So our main intention is for these people to be held accountable. And also, as it was mentioned here, we intend not only to find one propaganda person and to work with them, but also to find all of those connections. Hello, dear colleagues and dear partners, dear friends. Thank you for giving us opportunity to share the word about our platform. And we will be discussing some terrorists, collaborators, etc., which is readily available information in our system. I'm a specialist in business development of the Ukrinform company, and after February 24, our team decided to establish a tool intended to help discover the Russian footprints, because these propaganda agents are contributing into this war. And thanks to our partners, we are able to use the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption to impose sanctions against those people. So we are an experienced team, Ukrinform. We decided to use this experience, and based on this experience, we established the RuAssets system, and it helps to discover the tracks of Russians, including this list of collaborators. I would like to show you how this system works. So we have different categories here. We can go to each of the specific categories. So we have the information about some particular persons. We have the description of the data set, and you can go into the person's pages. You can do this on your own after you get registered in the system. So what's special about this system? There are over 20 different countries, and we can check each of the collaborators by each of those 20 countries. So we have collected some information, and what do we need to do to view it? We collected information about certain persons. We can select the person and look through the information. So the database also includes military criminals, the data that's published daily and collected by the Ministry of Defense. Also, there are criminals who serve in the Russian army. So all of them are here. And why and what for? First of all, you can check if the person belongs to some particular group. Later, you can check the person in different countries, and then you can also check their family members. Previously, we considered different possibilities. We considered the countries of CIS. Not always information of them is available, but still, if we have a collaborationist, if we have selected some particular person like this Mr. Zhdanov, we can check them in the system directly, and we can see here the description, we can see the source of the information, we can see the previous history of the person, and we can see that the sanctions were imposed on them. But that's not enough for us. We want to check who that person is. Everyone needs to see sources right now. No matter what conference we are speaking at, people always ask us, where did you get the data? Are you sure that the data is correct? Because many people are showing fakes. Many people are whitewashing their names. Since 2014, by 2022, there were just several hundred people introduced. Sanctions were imposed against 800 people, but right now there are over 10,000. And the most important part here is to have sources. This is important for the journalists. This is important for the investigators. We have this data. We can confirm that the person is not here by chance, and we can confirm that it's not a fake. So we can also type in this person in the system, and we can select them in certain categories. So we can already see that the person is a sanctions list, and can this person use the family member or to can they use them as the owner of their property? Of course they can, and that's what many people do. And our colleagues are collecting this information, and we analyze them, or you can analyze them, because each week new data become available. The partners are providing this data, and by this huge data sets we are going to do the search. So when the war is going to be over, we will still be looking for them, the terrorists, the military criminals, the one who are supporting Russia. This work will continue for years, and this is why this platform was created, to put our efforts together and let us find those people. So we are not much interested in the sanctions lists, but we are interested about the information about the person. So again, if the person was the state servant in the Russian Federation, they were submitting declarations, not as detailed as in Ukraine, but still from these declarations we can see some data, of course, date of birth and things like that, but also there are sources of information and connections of the person. So, for instance, there is a son. Can the son have some property? We can check the son. We can see the connections. We can see the companies opened by the person. So we can collect information from different integrators, and we use some evidence such as screenshots, web archives. We know that the Telegram channels become unavailable, but again, if screenshots are made in a timely manner, the evidence will be preserved. This is necessary for the journalists to be able to do their media investigations. Also, this information will be available to the law enforcement. We are not only the ones looking for such people. In the US, a special department is being established to discover such assets, such as buildings, companies, etc., etc. The things that can be confiscated for the compensation of losses in Ukraine. And also, speaking of business, you can check if the person is someone's relative, and whether you should or should not work with them. Let's consider Margarita Simonyan for an example. So we have 20 countries, as I have mentioned. This includes Poland, Britain, Cyprus, Malta, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc. The countries are different. I mean, their government registries, the data sets in them are different. So we are doing our best to collect as many open data as possible. Also, there is information about sanctions lists, the information that becomes available in our system. So the sanctions list that's available here is a sanctions list of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention. The information is available through API, and we can consider them here. We can consider family members. It simplifies our work, and we will need to work to find some particular information. Also, additionally, we can use other sources, declarations, etc., to discover the companies associated with the person. We can look into them, see who was the co-founder, and maybe there were already some journalist investigations already showing the connections. So this information collected by the colleagues will be used for updating. So if we have collected a database, no one is using it, sanctions were imposed against the person, then they were lifted. But why should we do this work? We do this work in order to collect additional information, and we were also collecting information about the top 1,000 managers of the Russian Federation. This comes from open sources. The problem is that some resources of the Russian Federation became unavailable after they were used in mass scale. So depending on our needs, the needs of the journalists, of the law enforcement, and of the business, this system can provide the necessary functionality. You can get registered, test it, and benefit from it. E-Control has been on the market for 8 years. This gives us the necessary experience to check the sanctions lists. So there are over 20 different lists here, and you can check information available here. Thank you. I would like to invite all of the speakers for the Q&A session. We understood that this is a database is for journalists and for law enforcement. How can journalists use it? Is it on UScan or UControl platform? The articles will be published, how to use it. The main thing is for you to get registered and to get verified. So we also intend to protect this data from persons who are not entitled to see them. So you have to provide information on where you work and what is the person of you accessing the data. The main intention of the platform is to find the traces of Russian and Belarusian activity. And do you have any feedback possibilities if the journalist has some additional information for your database? Yes, for instance, we have the methodology developed by our partners. If we are speaking of collaborators, so there is a description how to work with this kind of persons, and also there are other categories, and our employees are ready to consult you on the possibility of such interaction. Also, if you have any questions about the propaganda database. It's actually at the very first stage of its establishment, so you can submit your comments, and the database will be updated on a quarterly basis. Hello, I am Angelina Strishkulish from Ukrinform. I would like to ask about the Ukrainian propaganda agents. Have you looked into this aspect and what can be done to work against them? We, as an initiative, are doing lots of research right now to classify those who are working for the Russian propaganda. We have also selected a category of people who are not directly related to the Russian Federation. For instance, people who were working for Medvedchuk's channel. So they are, of course, different from Ilya Kiva or, let's say, Ms. Simonyan. So we are right now working on the second database, the one about the liberal bloggers, so to speak, both the Russian and Ukrainians. We will be collecting information on them. We will be classifying them on the usefulness or non-usefulness for Ukrainians. I mean, we are not calling them good Russians and bad Russians. We are just looking if they are supportive of Ukraine or not. And the third kind of people we are going to consider are Ukrainians who are working in the Ukrainian information space, and how helpful are they. We are conscious about accessing them in the last level, because the first stage is to go through the Russians. So have you started this interaction with the National Agency for Corruption Prevention? Yes, once we started working with this database, we have started working with them as well. So right now they have access to all the data available in the database, and we are planning to make updates on a monthly level. The idea is, once we have the information verified, and we have several stages of verification, we provide this data to them, and their employees are going through it as well. We discuss the plans for the forthcoming period. We discuss the focus. So, for instance, they are going to work with other countries as well, not only Russia, because unfortunately their activity is not limited with some geographic boundaries. So we intend to get some effect, not the database for the sake of database. No other questions. Thank you for this tremendous work you are doing. Hopefully, when we see each other next time, there will be some real outcomes and real accountability for those people. Thank you. Our next briefing is going to take place at 1 p.m. and we will have Marina Mezentseva with us.